Well, welcome along to the polling station. And obviously, a week is said to be a long time in politics. This could be a long week for Boris Johnson. If you go to the front page of the Daily Mail this morning, it's all over Bojo. It's all about very questionable allegations about things that he may or may not have said in relation to a potential third lockdown, and possibly William Kedjanyi. And I don't say this glibly on the Star Sports podcast this morning and video. The allegations about his renovation of his gaff in Downing Street actually might be every bit as bad, if not worse, in terms of Boris Johnson. And we have some market moves as a consequence of this. It could be an interesting few days for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, definitely. This is going to be, in terms of media management and just also in general, in terms of his personal and political life, a very difficult few days potentially for Boris Johnson. I have to say, probably all of his own making. We've seen similar situations in the past where he's managed to get himself into these holes. At the moment, there are three main stories, really. I think are swirling around Johnson personally. The first are remarks he made regarding the lockdown debate. The second is the renovation of the flats he has in Downing Street, where every Prime Minister lives. I believe it's over number 11. And third, a raft of allegations made by Dominic Cummings against him, including but not limited to, apparently, the shutting down of an inquiry to find a source who'd been leaking government information,
Yes.
which I find personally all a bit round the houses, given that the government has seen fit to govern by leak anyway, to prefer press sources, but that's for another day.
The allegations, firstly, in relation to the third lockdown. Now, this has been denied by Boris Johnson. We're doing this on Tuesday, and he's obviously going to be talking later on in the day and maybe clarifying a few things. But just the allegations were that he would rather see bodies pile high than approve a third lockdown. Now, that's obviously very unparliamentary language, but I dare say, William, it's not necessarily very un-Bojo language.
No, I think I don't know how to describe it. Let's say sickening. One of the sickening things about this is that you probably he's the only Prime Minister, I think, that you really could probably attribute something like that to, without, I don't think, too much doubt. I'm not going to cast aspersions on whether he said it, but this is eminently more believable coming from the man who said that you could build Dubai in Sirte, Libya, if you cleared the dead bodies away, then Theresa May or David Cameron or Gordon Brown or Tony Blair, all of whom, I'm sure behind closed doors, some very unparliamentary language is used every day in Downing Street, but I think you couldn't really attribute this to them in the same way you can to Johnson. In a way, actually, it sort of sums up the Johnson problem, which is that when it comes to prime ministers and governance, every other week there's something that he does that you would struggle even to imagine somebody from this Conservative Party doing. But that's what we've got.
Yeah, and I actually have respect for his opinion or his belief that there should not be a third lockdown. And I think, Britain have done very well on vaccinations. So the actual kind of belief that he wants to avoid a third lockdown, I can completely buy into. But the callous language is just something that we associate with him. But just even looking at the revised odds at Star Sports this morning, we can talk through this, William. He's still 11-4 to leave office this year, and he's still odds on to be the next Conservative leader at the next general election. Now, both of these have to come under pressure the next day or two.
I would say it would depend on a couple of things. Now, very interestingly, the UK in a changing Europe, and I believe this is Dr. Alan Wagner's work, although I'm sure he's been helped by a great team, have mapped out how much public interest there is in this story, how much cut through there is. And at the moment, You're seeing what I would say is a pretty decent level of public engagement with it. And it's also breaking through to both not only front pages, but also the broadcast media bulletins. So I think there will be some pressure. I think the really key thing here probably comes on three fronts. Number one, can it be proven that he said that he made those comments? Is there, for instance, an audio tape? I'd imagine that to be a bit of a stretch. Do people come on the record and say so under oath? You know, it would be a pretty ballsy move for them to do it now rather than say add an inquiry, but an inquiry looks very far down the line. Two, regarding the flat, is this something that can get enough cut through on its own? It looks as if that's the case, but not in a big way. Certainly the comments are getting more media attention. Secondly, also, can it be proven basically that something illegal took place there? At the moment, we have a situation where it appears that Johnson took a loan from the Conservative Party to pay for renovations to number 11 Downing Street, the flat. There's a £30,000 allowance per year. They wanted more, evidently. There were numbers bandied about. The top range is 200 grand, I think, in total. The allegation, I think, is that Johnson has either used money that isn't his own or has used money from public funds. You're allowed to use 30 grand. They're double over that. Can that narrative basically be spun into something that hits in the way the expenses scandal did? And I'm not sure about the answer to that. And third and finally, do all of these stories begin to cancel each other out? because
it's a very, very true statement. It's like one scandal is bad, 100 are just 99 more than one.
Yeah, exactly that. You've nailed it. I saw an amazing tweet, which I will try and put on the screen here for you. But it basically used a Simpsons meme, and there's number 10 common strategy. It's from Ben W. Ansell, and it said one Tory source said the government was lucky in a way to be fighting a war on so many fronts. Suggested it may mean the public may find the story confusing. And just after that is a fantastic screen grab from the episode, basically where Mr. Burns goes and has his health checkup, and the doctor tells him that there are so many diseases fighting for entry into him that they're all squashing each other out, and just one would kill him. And I get the feeling that just one of these stories would be far more harmful for Johnson than three. 3 or 4 makes it difficult, particularly in an era, in a way, where the thing that is nearly everybody's first thought and last thoughts as they wake up and go to bed is coronavirus. And when can I do stuff I like with my mates again?
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. And I think, like, short of basically killing 100,000 Britons today, he's probably in a reasonably safe position because people are so fatigued with everything else. And I mean, if you did a poll, Brexit's obviously an issue, but they just want to resume normal lives. And they really probably could care less about the renovation in Downing Street. Maybe I'm speculating. It should be pointed out he was 11-2 to go in 2020. So it's now 11-4. But just from an Irish perspective here, like, is there any probity, any sense of ethics, any sense of decency left in the Conservative Party at all? Or are we in a situation now, and we've seen this in the US, I think, with Donald Trump, where elected leaders can kind of get away with things now that maybe they wouldn't have been able to, I would even say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, where, I don't know, the population just, maybe they're spending so much time on their phones, they just don't care anymore?
Corruption isn't an entirely new thing. It's been around basically almost as long as politics has. The Conservatives aren't the only party, or this government isn't the only government to do it. I think it's on a much bigger scale with this government. Certainly sort of the access that people are getting, albeit in a pandemic, it was a pretty pressured situation, which in one way actually gave cover for whatever you would like to call it, cronyism or corruption on a public platform, obviously, so I have to be careful about that. And I would say that it's really clear that friends of this government get favours. That's in the public domain. The evidence is there, signed, sealed, and delivered. Many people suspected it. We now all know it. It's probably priced into a point because there's been polling done on this, and 37% of the population believe that Boris Johnson is corrupt and 36% believe the UK government is corrupt. It would appear to be pretty priced in. The issue, generally speaking, is a story that puts them against us, them being the government, us being sort of the general electorate. Barnard Castle's a great example of that, but it's difficult to find stories that have the right sort of emotional appeal and longevity. And I think also there's a space, there's the issue of political space. You know, how much time do people have to engage with this? I mean, in terms of can people get away with more than they did 10 years ago, depends a lot on the situation. Johnson and the Conservatives have around about an 8 to 10 point lead on average, generally speaking. I think the shortest Tory lead we've seen recently has been 4 points. So it's not like they're in any peril. If this cuts through, that lead might go down, but Keir Starmer and Labour are a lot more priced in, and they're now less of a threat, I think it has to be said.
I find all of that completely staggering, that you can essentially have a third to a half of the population believe that the government and the Prime Minister is corrupt, but they're obviously happy enough with the status quo at the same time, which I don't think, you know, sends a very good message at all for politics going into the future. But I believe that is basically the true situation. What else do we have, though, in terms of the political ramifications? I mean, we're all interested to find out the Hartlepool by-election, which you will mention week on week here. Conservatives are 1-2 to win that, but there is also movement, obviously, in terms of the next leader.
Yeah, there is. So Rishi Sunak, this is for the next Prime Minister, I should say, not next Tory leader. I'll bring up very soon. But Rishi Sunak has moved out to 5-2. For a year or so, you were lucky if you got 6-4. That he was next Prime Minister. Keir Starmer is 11-4. Michael Gove 13-2. Those are some pretty significant moves that we've seen all around the sort of rumour mill with Johnson, and a sort of feeling that these recent Daily Mail front pages and these recent leaks sort of prove that, you know, no Tory party leader is, you know, indispensable, and that he can be pushed out. In terms of the runners and riders for replacement, Sunak's 2-1 with us. Michael Gove is 5-1. There's been a lot of rumours that Michael Gove has been pushing this. He did work with Cummings. The Westminster rumour mill's going into overdrive about that a bit. We've got Jeremy Hunt at 8s, Liz Truss at 11s, Dominic Raab at 12s, Priti Patel at 16s, Sajid Javid at 16s, and Tom Tugendhat at 18s, and Penny Mordaunt at 20s. Apparently 6 ministers have set up potential teams for leadership challenges. Difficult to know who exactly they are. I would have gone Sunak, Gove, Truss, Patel, Hunt, and maybe even somebody like Matt Hancock, or actually I should say maybe even throw Gavin Williamson. I think he might try it possibly again. But I do think that's all just a bit far away for the moment. But it's interesting because, you know, if the Tory party wants to, they're perfectly happy to issue a leader. And I think we all know what's happened in the past with them. Gove has been mentioned on previous episodes as a potential runner for future leadership. His issue is basically that he isn't looked upon as favourably by much of the media, or much of the Tory supporting press, should say, as Sunak is. Sunak got a lot of glowing praise for the government's economic response to coronavirus, but seemed to take none of the criticism for the government's terrible scientific response, of which he was a big part. And I think twos is probably fair, but I'd be worried about the timing of the next leadership election. You know, if you go into the autumn and all those levers of support are withdrawn, then you have a lot more of an economic challenge on your hands. And that would be the point, I'd say, when things will start to get difficult for Sunak, as I've said, for quite a long time.
We've got to mention as well the Greensill Capital Cameron links, which, according to a recent poll, UK Interchange in Europe, as you mentioned, they're actually quite significant minority of people are taking an interest in this. And for people who are not aware, these are links between the former leader David Cameron, who obviously was hugely responsible for Brexit in many respects, his government, and the finance company Greensill Capital. He's been criticised for lobbying ministers on behalf of the company in which he had a commercial interest. This is something that I don't think has gotten a lot of traction in Ireland, but is obviously of increased relevance and interest over there.
Yeah, it is. So to round off, I'm told by Alan that there's a data point which puts interest in Cameron and Greensill, as you can see, is at 24% for all voters, 26% for Conservatives, and 32% for Labour voters. Apparently, it's 10 points higher for the Johnson-Cummings back and forth, to give it a polite name. That, to me, seems big. But again, it depends on which story becomes the dominant one. I would say that if Johnson could pick, he'd probably say, I would like the stories to be about Greensill, or I'd like them to be about the flats. And
it's Boris Johnson just ringing you now, just clarifying that everything's okay.
Yes, indeed. That is Johnson and Cummings.
Just have him on the record.
Yes, indeed. We'll get him on the record. But just to round off quickly, these are not good data points for the government and the Tory party image overall. They would want anything but back and forth, even if it's just between Johnson and Cummings. Reason being that Cummings has lots of information and nothing to lose, and the ear of all types of journalists, both print and broadcast and online. He can create a lot of hot air and a lot of bad news for the government, and that's more dangerous, I think, than the flat situation, especially if no taxpayer money was used. I think also, you know, Johnson's image is tied closely enough to the parties for this to be a problem for the Conservatives, and I think this may not be the last that we hear of potential moves in either these markets or just in general Johnson's future.
Yeah, and so he's just left you a voicemail there as well. So that's how close
you are to the Prime Minister. Yeah. What a way to end the program.
Yeah, it is a fascinating thing. You know, Cummins can kind of tip away in the background, have a little bit of fun with this and see what happens. It's going to be a fascinating 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we have the small matter of local elections. So do indeed watch this space. And thank you very much for watching this program.